Give me 1 second.
No problem.
Here, while we have a second, I have something to announce. You see this?
Yeah, it's a
Can
phone
everybody
booth.
see those yellow pads on the ground? That was a phone booth that was here for the last 8.5 years at least.
Congratulations, yeah.
And you took it home.
Yeah.
So, progress,
Are you using it now? Is that what's
progress
going
amidst the pandemic. All
Where-
right,
where-
turning video off until I get upstairs.
I have to say how long it takes to remove those simple phone booths and how many emails have to go out and how many council members need to be involved to get a phone booth removed. It's turning me into a libertarian as opposed to a socialist.
In 20 years, you're doing well.
All right, we are live.
You're live? Okay, fantastic. All right, everybody, welcome to the November 18th, 2020 meeting of the CB6 Executive Committee. My name is Kyle Athaid, and I'm the chair of CB6. This meeting is being called to order at 6:33 p.m. Tonight, we are joined by District Manager Jesus Perez. For members of the public, if you're attending, raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. If there is time following the committee's discussion, we will field questions from the public. So tonight's minutes will be taken by CB6 Assistant Secretary Matt Bondi. And now we will begin by taking attendance by roll call. So please answer present when your name is called. Matt, if you're taking,
I think that's you, Matt.
Yes. I'm ready. Okay. I'll start to call the roll right now. Athaid.
Present.
Bondi, present. Brennan.
Present.
Disman.
Present.
Eggers.
Here.
Hartke.
Here.
Hollister.
Here.
Keller.
Sure.
Matthew.
Here.
O'Keefe.
Present.
Roberts.
Present.
Santoro.
Here.
Shah.
Here.
Sherrod. Sherrod? Okay. Thompson.
Here.
Vanderdonk.
Here.
Nieuwenhoven.
Here.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a quorum.
Both Claude and Letty are in the attendees as opposed to the panelists. Is that by design, or do they need to be promoted to panelists?
If they want to be promoted, they can be, but we only send out panelist invites to the actual members of exec.
Oh, okay. I thought. Okay.
Thank you for that. And thank you, Matt, for the attendance. I appreciate that. So the agenda for tonight's meeting should appear on the screen before you. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda as stated. The members of the executive committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, please raise your hand through Zoom. Okay. Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. The minutes from the October 21st meeting were distributed to executive committee members ahead of time by the board office. So if there is no objection, we will adopt these minutes. Committee members, if you object to adopting the minutes, again, please raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the minutes from the October 21st meeting are adopted. So to begin, we'll just set some ground rules. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe a few of these. 1, no one may speak until granted the floor. 2, committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. If you click the participants icon, the participants panel should appear and you should find the raise hand function there. If you still have technical difficulty, click on the chat icon and express your difficulty through the chat. The chat function should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing information such as an email address or a link that was already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. Now, once a committee member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you and you can unmute yourself so that you can speak and make your comment or ask your question. And lastly, we are required by executive order to create a verbatim transcript of this meeting. So please make it easy on our secretary and assistant secretary and keep questions and comments succinct and germane to this discussion. All right. And we end up. All right. So I'm going to begin by delivering my chair's report. So the first thing that I want to mention is I, again, want to thank the previous executive committee for their leadership. Again, in particular, our former chair, Molly. Thank you so much for everything that you have done during your tenure for our district and for our board. We'll never be able to express appreciation. And as this being the first executive committee since your term ended, I want to welcome you to being a participant, and I look forward to your continued contributions and definitely your mentorship and support. So thank you to all of the previous exec and our former chair, Molly. I also want to discuss some housekeeping. I want to bring this up for discussion to the executive committee about some reorganization that we have had. Part of this was required by people moving off and on and some chairs that needed to be replaced. And this really allowed us to have some time to recalibrate and reevaluate the organization of our committees. And based on some of the feedback, not only from the board itself, but also from people who interface with our board, whether they be the public or other community groups, I had some ideas on, first of all, pulling out some committees and creating new committees, and then renaming some of the committees so that they more closely described the work that the committee is doing, but also with public interface so that people know where to go and which committees to go to. And so the first two committees that I'm thinking of creating, which are basically just pulling out from two other committees, is with the Transportation and Public Safety Committee. I would like to pull out the Public Safety Committee from Transportation and create a Human Rights and Public Safety Committee. So that we can more closely focus on those specific issues, and particularly in relation to one another, human rights, public safety. This will also allow transportation to focus solely on transportation issues as well. And the second is to pull public health out from education and to create a public health, senior services, and social services one committee that focuses solely on those issues. So I'd like to open that up for any feedback, any comments on that. This is essentially just pulling two things apart to be most efficient with our time, but also to make sure that with these issues being very prominent, not only nationally, but in our district as well, to create these committees to give them the space and time to discuss such issues. So are there any feedback on that or any ideas on that?
What's the proposed name of the second one? Public health to?
Yeah, so it's pulling out health from education, and it will be called Public Health, Senior Services, and Social Services. John, I see your hand up. Please feel free to speak.
Okay, yeah, no, and I think you mentioned when we discussed this briefly privately of having the education committee also be youth and education, or is that something you reconsidered?
Correct. Yeah. So I'll be going. I just want to talk about the two committees that I'm pulling out, and then I'll talk about renaming after that.
I got it. Yeah, this is something I actually raised to the former chair of our committee, of our board, and it's worth a good discussion, I think, but I don't know whether you want to get into detail on it tonight. There are pros and cons, I think, on both sides of separating the two committees, but that's certainly something I'd be happy to be supportive of if that's the direction you go.
All right. Thank you, John. Yeah, I don't want to get too into too much conversation about it, but I do want to mention it to the executive committee. And if there is feedback, this would be the time to share that so we can deliberate and reverse over it if there are any ideas about that.
Well, okay, so yeah, so the feedback would be that with education, there are many voices in the city already. So, asking the committee to focus on education, would mean defining a specific role. I mean, we have community education councils, we have PAs, we have family and community engagement, we have the Chancellor's Parent Advisory Committee. We have many groups that already focus on education. So it would be a really good discussion to say, okay, what is the unique community board contribution to the discussion of education in the city? And that's something I think is a good conversation to have. Not that it was maybe too much in the weeds to have tonight, but it would be a good conversation to have. Because
absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, John.
Sorry, this is Seema. I just, I actually, now that I'm hearing, these two committees and I'm kind of processing the recommendation or at least a suggestion, I actually think like social services, human rights, and senior services, actually the three of them, potentially there's like a string or thread that could tie all of that together as opposed to doing what I think you were suggesting, which is social services, and what was it, public health and senior services. Yes, I actually think if I'm understanding this correctly, like the thread to me that's stronger is human rights, senior services, and social services, and not tying human rights to public safety. I actually just had like a really visceral reaction to that as like not something I'd feel comfortable doing, because I don't want them to be like two sides of a coin. But yeah, I'd make that kind of recommendation or suggestion as a fine point to yours.
Okay, thank you for that. Kavitha, I see your hand up as well.
Yeah, I just had a question. Are you pulling human rights then out of the Housing, Homeless, and Human Rights Committee, that title?
Yeah. Yeah, so housing, and I'll get into this in terms of renaming, but that I want to focus on housing and human rights, housing and homelessness. The idea is that at the end, a lot of these, as Seema just eloquently put, a lot of these issues are very interrelated to one another. So the hope is as well that a lot of these committees end up doing joint work as well. So human rights being a broad subject, obviously goes into housing as well, goes into public health, goes to education as well, and really kind of creating that environment that creates more partnership amongst our committees as well, and engagement. That was kind of an idea of this as well, is to increase engagement, again, not only within the board itself, but with public interface as well. So if someone had an idea about, where do I go for this type of topic, they would have a better sense of where to direct those specific inquiries or ideas.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with Seema about the human rights and public safety feeling a little bit off, but I also do think that human rights, like you said, encompasses so many different things, so it's a little confusing. It's like it's gonna relate to whatever committee you tie it in with, like whatever title you put it aside next to, it's going to be human rights in relation to this. So I think that's that makes it a little harder to decide where you actually put that huge, very important.
Yeah, topic. Absolutely. I appreciate that. B, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to comment about the human rights and also public safety, because I've seen public safety being handled in a number of ways. Once it was a standalone committee as public safety, and the people that were on transportation also were on public safety. And it actually didn't work being a standalone. So we just actually put back public safety with transportation. And a lot of the issues on transportation are public safety issues that you deal with, hazardous corners and stuff. So I think that still goes, and I think we should actually try it under new leadership. But human rights is something that I had a visceral reaction also to talk about human rights and public safety. It really covers the range of all the committees you have. And so I think that's more problematic. I don't know if you have in your mind an overriding committee. I don't know if it goes in governmental or whatever, but I just don't think it just belongs with safety because it really is a totally different issue.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Corinne, I see your hand up as well. And if anyone else has any questions or comments, I can't see everyone's screen. So if you could do the hand in Zoom, that'd be. So Corinne, you're up.
I mean, I agree with what V is saying, and Kavita and Seema. Yeah, at the same time, a standalone public safety without some kind of and something else can very quickly turn into a committee that is maybe hyper focused on safety and not able to, and not looking at the broader picture. So if it's not public safety and human rights, it should be public safety and quality of life, or I don't, like something. I'm just concerned if it's just public safety that it will just kind of attract a certain way of thinking that I'm not comfortable with either.
All right, thank you for that as well. Matt Roberts.
Yeah, a couple of things on this. I don't think the human rights, public safety is the most logical combination. There's just too much going on there. I do agree that public safety is probably not a standalone committee unless there's something else there. Some months you'd have a lot of content, and then you'd probably go a few months where there's very little. But I mean, public safety kind of ties to a lot of our other committees. I mean, you have traffic safety, safety in schools. You have safety, all over, like quality of life. I mean, but again, that bleeds into homelessness or some of the other things that Corinne's committee is handling. So I think there's probably a path here. I'm just not sure exactly.
All right, thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. Gene?
Yeah, the thing that occurs to me is that public safety and public health both have public in them. But beyond that, I think they might be a better fit than some of the other things that you're talking about. The problem with putting it back into Transpo is that the last times we had it in Transpo, the committee meetings averaged 2 to 3 hours because Transpo has a lot to do in its own terms, and public safety wound up being pretty much an afterthought. And I don't think that's the way to go. I think maybe if we beefed it up by putting it with public health, which is, especially in the age of COVID, those two things strike me as being things that are related. That's it.
Thank you for that. That's a good point as well. And then Mark, I believe your hand is up. Sorry, I didn't see.
Sorry, I don't know how to get the little hand thing up in the corner. I can't find that button. I'm like, where is it? Yeah. So I'll just yell. One alternative too we could have is maybe having a task force, because some of the issues, for example, public safety is a major issue, but it doesn't always come up. Human rights is obviously a major issue, doesn't always come up. We could just do task force that are called together when an issue is raised, and it could be people from multiple committees, 4 people, let's say, who could just, work on that, then bring it back to committees rather than have it be a standing committee. That way we acknowledge the issue, but it's not, full committee.
All right, that's a good idea as well. Thank you. And B, I see your hand is still up. Do you have an additional comment, or is that just from before?
Sorry, that's from before. Got to take it down. Thank you.
Where is the hand anyway? I can't find it.
There should be, if you see in the chat section, or
It's
the
actually
panel section,
under
there should be-
participants. It's in the participants.
There should be a raise hand
Mark, I
button.
sent you a screenshot. That might help.
All right, so thank you everybody for providing that feedback. Now just to speak about some renamings, and again, this could, is open to feedback as well. If pulling out public health from education, I'd like to call it youth and education. With business affairs, I'd like to call that business affairs and licensing. A lot of people don't know what street activity stuff is and kind of think everything goes under that. So I wanted to put licensing for the title so that people know that we focus on licensing.
Does that mean the meeting will be shorter?
Yeah, maybe. Environment and parks is what I would like to call the parks committee as it is now, environment and parks, and obviously still overseeing landmarks and cultural affairs, but having that the title. And then with the budget committee, having it be known as the budget district needs, which I think are more closely aligned with the actual focus of the committee as well. So those are some thoughts on renaming. I don't know if anyone has thoughts on that as well.
I have one thought. This is a little bit off the cuff, but what about potentially public safety and business affairs or business affairs and licensing? Because a lot of the complaints that we get from folks within the businesses are around inadequate space to walk, like, lots of trash everywhere. They're actually like public safety issues, like inaccessibility and, all of those sorts of things. So, I mean, those are the types of conversations that we've been having.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. I mean, that's one of the things I was thinking about, like, especially with human rights and then public safety, is that a lot of these things, again, interrelate with one another. Particularly with public safety, again, it also is the idea of not wanting to make every single thing a public safety or then, within a lot of people's mind, a police issue. So really thinking about how connecting those as well. And that's also why I wanted to bring it up for discussion as well, to kind of think this through as an executive committee together on what makes the most sense moving forward. But thank you for that. It's interesting that you were thinking about that as well. Kevin, I see your hand up.
Yes, you had mentioned that it also includes for environment and parks to include landmarks. How about arts and culture? Because that clearly has already been part of that committee.
Yeah, so I don't want to make it too long of a name. Then it becomes kind of like a...
I love that you making things succinct. I'm just saying that you said, of course, that's also going to cover landmarks. Does that mean it's also going to cover cultural affairs?
So your committee will still oversee that. Doesn't necessarily need to be in the name. I think it's in the description. So just really hitting on the idea of environment parks, which are the things that you will focus most on. And I know obviously today we had a correspondence about a landmark issue. So still having that within the committee as well is important, but just thought to be more succinct and to the point.
Yeah, just want to make sure it hasn't been extracted to another committee. Thank you.
Yep. No. So. All right. So I don't see any other hands on this. So I appreciate everyone's feedback. I'll take that back and I'll work with the board staff and figure out what makes the most sense and obviously logistical sense as well. So that's for me. So I'd like to now pass it on to our district manager, Jesus Perez.
Thank you, Kyle. Good evening, everyone. I'll be quick. Minutes update. For BASA, the August and September minutes were received and they'll be voted on in November. For parks, the November meeting minutes have been submitted and they're being reviewed by the committee chair. So that's good. The October minutes for transportation were submitted and will be adopted at their next meeting in December. For housing, the meeting minutes are being drafted and they will be adopted hopefully at the next meeting in December. One note about that, Raj is writing them. It's the third time this year he has written minutes. So for the housing committee, it might be good to try and encourage folks to share that responsibility a little bit more. I know it's tough in some of these committees. Land use, the October minutes have been received and will be adopted at the next meeting. Health, the October meeting minutes have been received and will be adopted at their next meeting. Budget, those meeting minutes are being drafted and will be adopted at their next meeting. And for 197A, same goes. And they have been received and will be adopted at the next meeting of that committee. A couple housekeeping notes. We are actually going to be getting a new liaison to Councilmember Powers' office, so you may be seeing them at your meetings. As you know, we've been working with Sarah Newman, but she's actually transitioning in that office to a legislative role. So we are going to get a new person. His name is Pat Hill, and he will be taking over constituent and community relations work at Councilmember Powers' office. And Pat previously worked for Councilmember Cohen up in the Bronx. So be sure to welcome them if you see them in your meetings. And thank you very much, everyone, for being patient. As you know, Brendan has been out of the office for most of this month. And so we're a little bit short-staffed. And so thank you for your patience in bearing with us as things have taken a little bit longer to get done. We're always very grateful for Brendan, but we certainly are cognizant of it now. So thank you very much. And we're doing really well in the newsletter. In the past 30 days, we've gotten almost 300 new subscribers. We really want to try and get those numbers up because, you know, for some of these meetings, you know, for example, recently Housing had a meeting, and one of the things that folks said was that, hey, this thing on the agenda, we didn't know about it. Well, the more people are in our newsletter, the more people, and you know, where we do talk about those things, the more people can get can be aware of these things before the meetings come up. And so hopefully we can sort of intercept some of that, and folks won't be taken by surprise. But we're doing really well, and we're continuing to get those numbers up. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Jesus. We'll now begin with our committee reports. So the first up is Kevin with Parks.
Okay. The only report I have is we're putting together an agenda. And can you hear me? My thing just glitched. Can everybody hear me?
Yep,
Yes.
I can hear you.
My screen went black, so good. I'm glad to hear that. Just putting together the only report I have is that we're putting together the agenda for the next meeting, and should be done momentarily. Outside of that, I will pass.
All right, are there any questions for Kevin or Parks?
I'm back on the screen. Good.
Okay. All right, seeing none, let's move on to the next committee with
It looks like
197.
Rick Eggers requests the floor.
Rick, go ahead.
I just wondered, isn't there a there's a parks agenda on there. Is that the last meeting?
No, that is the upcoming December meeting.
That's a working.
Okay, it's just in progress.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a couple of question marks on there.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay, so Kevin, then you're
Adam.
Kevin,
yeah, mine's
go
quick.
ahead.
Kevin, love the background.
Thank you. You know what that is?
Yeah, it's the old Eastern Airlines parking garage.
Yeah, very good. Now
I have the same postcard at my office.
Oh, you're kidding. That's wonderful.
Nah, it's great. Best $2 I ever spent.
The Corinthian took over, right?
Yes, right.
Jesus, sorry for cutting you off.
no problem. So Kevin, we'll leave this agenda as it is, and in the coming days, you will let us know what you want us to do about the Albano playground item, as well as the POPs item.
Yeah, we could address it quickly right now. I mean, the Albano, we're just waiting to hear back from Steve Simon to see if he can be present at the in the POPs obstructions, we want to do a little bit more research to make sure that there's not something already in the works to take down that scaffolding. There's no reason to address it if there's something that's, you know, already moving that down. But I wanted to do a little more research on that. That's all.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to 197A, Kavitha.
Yeah, okay. this is still a draft agenda as well. The last meeting that we had, we reviewed our ongoing work for creating the website around the MSBI sale. And we're getting pretty close, but there's still a few things to do on that. And we just have created a task tracker that's following what we need to do, the final pieces. And then once we're ready, I'll talk to you, Kyle, a little bit more about that, how we want to launch it, who we want to send it, announcements to. And we do want to actually have it in the newsletter, maybe even by December. We talked about that, but Jesus, I don't know if you're aware of that. I talked to Cody about that. We'll see if we're ready to do that, but hopefully that could get a few more people, to see that and read it. We also discussed the first item on that draft agenda was because we had discussed and looked at a report by George Janes about the history of rent, like of affordable housing and like the rent stabilized units in the district or in all the districts in the city, and really seeing the fall off of those numbers. We were hoping to have a presentation. I think there was an idea of either doing this at full board or at land use or at 197A. I think Claude mentioned he was good with doing it at the next 197A, potentially a short presentation. He's given one like this before that some of you may have been part of, but I haven't. I would love to see it. And I think it would be good to invite the whole, whoever wants to attend the whole board, especially the newer members, to kind of get an overview of that, because that's going to be really important in the ongoing work of 197A. In addition to that, we're just really working on timing and outreach. And the idea that I had was to maybe convene some kind of panel, shooting for January, February with MSBI, maybe a group that represents more affordable or sustainable housing or other things we're trying to look into getting into that site, how to do it, and have more of a panel first, and then look to do more of an open community meeting, maybe in the following month. So that's really all I had.
Awesome. That sounds great. Those are a lot of great ideas.
And I'm happy to rename this too, even though it is 197A. You didn't come up with a new name for me, which I'm really sad about. I feel neglected.
We can talk. I didn't talk to you yet. So talk soon. Next up. Before we go, are there any questions for Kavitha or the 97A before we move on?
So Kavitha,
Right,
So Kavitha, we'll go ahead and put all the non-tentative agenda items up on the website, and we'll leave off the presentation on affordable housing until you inform us that it's happening.
Yeah, we can just confirm that, and then I'll let you know.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. Moving on to Gina, transportation.
There we go. Today's update on the sinkhole, everybody's favorite thing. The crews were actually there starting to move things around. They figured that they should have the new layout for the sort of detour in place by Friday. There'll be 2 asphalt humps over the median there, about 20-25 feet. Cars will be detoured into the parking lot for that amount of time. The rest of the time they'll be on the service road, including by the helipad. Bikes and pedestrians will be using the parking lot. They'll be blocked off from the section that the cars are using, so they'll be separated. And they'll be able to continue safely between the north and south ends of the parking lot that way, and they won't be crossing any traffic as they currently are. The crew chief today, the supervisor, told me that they expect to be done the end of December, really not in 3 weeks or 4 weeks like we were told on the call yesterday, but that's just a couple of weeks more. So they can only work at low tide because of the nature of what they're working with. So that's that. As far as these 2 things, yeah, we need to get on this. We especially need to get on the ECSR, the ESCR stuff, because the crews have already started taking over parts of Sidewalk Park, as well as the parking lot under the FDR. So if we want to have any part of the conversation about what they're going to do with the bypass for bikes, pedestrians, and joggers, for example, we should have had it like a month ago, but we haven't seen anything formal. We have to force that as fast as possible for December to try to get a voice in there about what they're doing, because otherwise they'll have the whole place set up and they won't want to move at all. And the last thing is, under old and new business, I was going to raise with the committee the idea of doing a forum. So thank you, Kavitha. Doing a forum or a panel in the probably also February at this point, based off partly the RPA analysis of like networking, traveling around New York City, bikes and micromobility devices and all that stuff, the networking and getting other people. Sam Schwartz would be one, hopefully, and DOT would be one. And to get everybody to get 10 or 15 minutes, give us a presentation about the bigger picture, our district in particular, how it fits in, and call it something like Getting Around Town in the 21st Century. Because a lot of our work over the next year or two is going to be basically rearranging street space to allow for people to move in a very different way. And that's it.
Thank you, Gene. Also very great ideas. I love it. Are any questions for Gene or transportation? Or about sinkholes, our favorite subject? All right, seeing none. Jesus, do you have anything before we move on to the next committee?
No, we'll go ahead and put the one confirmed agenda item for transportation, and we'll wait until we hear back until the East Side Coastal Resiliency item is actually confirmed.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. All right, so full board meeting is on December 9th. Budget is canceled meeting for December 14th. Our next executive is on the 16th. And next up is Basa from our new Basa chair.
Hello, thank you, Kyle. So it says here our agenda is still information, which it is, and we will know more of the licenses that we have to talk about, if any, approaching as the meeting comes closer. So those will be some items potentially, but I was talking to Anton today to kind of like be a little bit caught up and briefed on Basa in general. And he had two great ideas that I think we can spread out over the next 2 months probably. But just thinking into the time that we are in right now, a lot of unknowns out there, but potentially maybe indoor dining might need to be closed again. And if so, there will presumably still be outdoor dining. But as the weather today showed us, it's getting colder, and it probably, I think a lot of businesses are starting to think about heating lamps and everything. So we were thinking of adding one agenda item to kind of just catch up on the status of outdoor dining in the neighborhood, and kind of to have folks contribute some observations that they might have seen recently based on current changes to the program. So as you all know, our November meeting is tomorrow. So I think in my new business, I'll bring that up to ask folks to be prepared to kind of have a discussion on outdoor dining, the status of it in our district. But other than that, it's still information, I would say.
Awesome, thank you, Claire. Corinne, I see your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to bring it up that yes, I was going by passing by a restaurant, an outdoor dining area of a restaurant today, and I saw like 5 or 6 heating lamps, like one for each table. And my thought just immediately went to safety. I'm just like, is that really safe? I'm just like, it's wood, you know, there's like heating lamps. It's like, it just, you know, my mom, intuition just was going off, and it was just like, no, this does not look good. So I don't know. That's just comments, if you want to look at it as for BASA.
Yes, I welcome those for sure. I actually, interestingly enough, have witnessed twice now in two different areas of the city. One might have been in our district and one was notably not, but I did see like numerous FDNY officers kind of like doing a total survey of sidewalk seating and like out with their measuring tape and really like seeming to be paying attention to the regulations and the spacing, because I completely agree it could be very dangerous, you know, when you add things that could spontaneously combust to an already crowded sidewalk situation. So I think that it could just be a casual discussion. We won't make it really long, but I think observations like that and asking the committee to bring kind of more specific intersections or places of note to discuss. And then we can see what happens from there, or what might need to be done.
Kavita, I see your hand up as well.
Yeah, just a quick, just to add on to that observation of outdoor seating at the restaurants. I noticed a lot of them are being kind of shrink wrapped with this plastic all around it, and almost entirely enclosed.
Right.
Sometimes with heating, but there's no ventilation in there. So to me, it's like this weird COVID incubator situation that we feel like people are safe just because they're outside, but they're not. Right. I mean, you know, I'm going to talk to my architect friends about like how these are being thought through. I think there's been just so much of a pass through to help the businesses survive, which I'm really on board with. I just want to make sure, you know, that those things are being done safely.
Definitely.
Yeah, it kind of defeats the point of not having indoor dining when you're just doing indoor dining outside with plastic. But
exactly.
Jean, your hand is up as well.
Yep. Yeah. Just to support what Claire was talking about, it's my understanding from the stuff I've seen that DOT has very specific, increasingly specific regulations, just like they did at the beginning. They had specific regulations and then they tightened them up 2 weeks later. So people had to pull things apart and put them back together again. They have increasingly specific regulations about what the outdoor dining is supposed to be during cold weather. And the fire department is very much involved from everything that I've seen. So I don't know what that means yet. And I think it's very much worth looking into and very important to look into. But I think Claire has a point that if she's seen the fire marshals already tromping around looking at these things, that's because they are supposed to be doing that throughout the entire city.
Right.
And maybe that might mean connecting with the FDNY as well to see how outdoor dining has been working with fire safety. Corinne, I see your hand is still up. Do you have a follow-up, or is that just from before? Okay. Well, moving on to the next committee, which is Housing, Homeless, and Human Rights. To say there's no meeting for December. Do you have a report back or a share back or anything like that?
I'm sorry, Claire. So just to be clear, you'd like us to add discussion on the status of outdoor dining in the district as one of your agenda items for your December agenda.
That would be wonderful.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Jesus.
Thank you. Corinne, do you have a report back or share back or your?
So I'm only now starting to recuperate from our meeting on Monday about a new adult family shelter and the subsequent hate mail. But yeah, so our district is getting our 5th shelter. It is a 170 units for adult families. So it could be, you know, a son with their elderly mom. It could be parents with an adult child that has some kind of disability, or, you know, like many kinds of mix-ups. And we had a meeting on Monday that attracted a lot of people who were just kind of opposed for the sake of they were just opposed, no matter what was being said. And it wasn't pretty. So we're taking a break in December.
Well deserved break. But I do want to say I will join that meeting. I joined it by YouTube actually, and I do want to commend Corinne and Rich for just leading a wonderful committee meeting. I know sometimes, for any of us, but particularly on issues like homelessness, it may not seem like it was a well-run meeting. But I do want to commend just being on the outside from that it was very well run. It is hard to deal and to manage the raw emotions of the public, and to also deal with government agencies and the bureaucracy, and to explain that to a community that isn't necessarily involved with the issue until it affects them personally. So I want to commend again Corinne and Rich for dealing with such a hard issue, but also being very proactive about it, and keeping open mind and open ears about it. It's a very difficult thing to do. So I do want to, thank you for your leadership on that, and deserve the month off in December.
Thank you, Kyle.
All right. Are there any questions or comments for Corinne or the Housing, Homelessness, and Human Rights Committee? All right, seeing none, let's move on to health and education. John, do you have a report back?
Just very quickly, we're adapting on the fly. If those of you following this know that the mayor sometime this afternoon announced that schools will be closed starting tomorrow and go all remote. So I've already asked someone from the Community Education Council for District 2 to appear at there's no need to change the agenda, Jesus, for Tuesday's meeting, but I have invited someone from the Community Education Council for District 2 to come and address this, because we think we might have parents showing up. And then I'm also going to reach out to family and community engagement, to the DOE, to have them come and have someone answer for this, because there is a lot of reaction already around the city to this decision to close the schools. Because if you look at the data, the deal that was cut between the DOE and the UFT was that schools would be closed if the infection rate reached 3% in the city, which was heavily driven by Mr. Mulgrew and the DOE and the UFT. But the infection rate in the schools themselves is only like 0.22%. And I have spoken to no one, either in my kids' schools or in other parents' schools, who have reported any infections, among students or faculty in most of the schools. That's happened just in isolated cases. So I think, so we are adapting our agenda for Tuesday's meeting, and we never meet, at least in the 3 years I've been on the board. This committee traditionally doesn't meet in December, maybe because it's 3 days before Christmas. Okay, that's that.
All right, thank you, John. Actually, I have a clarifying question myself. It might be a stupid question, but I was just curious about this. When we're talking about the infection rate being, like about 2%, is that infection rate between kids, or between kids and teachers, or amongst?
It's 0.2. It's actually 0.2%, and it's between anybody that's in the building. Okay. So from kids to teachers or staff, as I understand it. I can double check it, but that's the point is that it's not just the 3% threshold in the city, which scares me, but in the school buildings itself, it's just 0.2%. And so there are a lot of people that are saying, why are we closing schools, and taking, so we should, I anticipate we'll have people showing up on Tuesday night, but Jesus, there's no need to change the agenda. I'm just going to try to invite a couple people to show up and talk.
Okay.
All right. And last but not least, Adam with Land Use and Waterfront.
Excellent, thank you. So I'll start with the easy stuff. Much like the preceding committees, I think we're going to lay over all of our agenda items, which right now is nothing, to January. So a long earned rest for our committee, considering we're going to have a really big ULURP coming up on Monday. So a nice public hearing. So I guess to transition to that, so the meeting that we're going to have on Monday, and we essentially have 2 items on our agenda. One, we're going to have just a regular monthly update from DDC regarding the East Side Coastal Resiliency. Like Gene was talking about earlier, we're hoping to have this really focused in terms of open space, specifically open space that is going to compensate for the open space that we're not going to have. And so Cody's already reached out to Parks and has put forth a bunch of comments and questions to them so they can better hone their presentation. We'll touch base with DDC by the end of the week so they can do the same. Another big item that's come up with this project, as Gene alluded to earlier, is that they've started staging, they've started construction. This is all consistent with what they reported to us on November 15th. But however, though, we sort of got word that they're going to be closing Astrolevy potentially as soon as this week. And Molly and Gene, feel free to jump in. But it was sort of my understanding we had a little bit more time with this. And actually, I just got an email today from the general account, and the wording there was, how do I put it? It wasn't wrong, but it didn't necessarily say that the park was imminently closing like within this week. And so I think a big thing we want to stress to them, the thing we've been saying for over the past year now, is that they're going to have to be very clear in terms of how they communicate these major disruptions, to us as a community, and frankly to the entire community outside the board. So I think that's definitely going to be an item that we're going to bring up with them.
All right, thank you, Adam. I see a hand from Kevin.
Yes, Adam, can you go in a little more detail on Astrolevy potentially closing?
So I know as pretty much as you do. I believe Keith Powers, again, Molly or Gene, feel free to jump in here. Keith Powers' office forwarded an email from to Waterside to Janet, basically saying that the park was probably going to close within this week. It was my understanding that the park was going to close soon. I thought it was going to be December or potentially January, but that's pretty much all I know at this point.
And that's the park area that includes the track area, as far as you know?
All of it, yeah. All of it is, as far as I know, it's going to be done according to the letter that they sent to Keith, that Keith forwarded to Janet, that we got. Basically, they're going to be closing the park to begin staging it, and then I guess they're going to begin working on it. That's supposed to be the first part that's done, right, Adam?
Yeah, that's supposed to be the first part that's done, and they've been very upfront with it. But it's just sort of the, for these sort of closures in the communication that it could be a little bit better.
Communication for sure. I mean, how is the public notified besides showing up and seeing a sign? Hopefully, there's some proactive.
Right.
Going
on. So Kevin, I've actually signed up for the email alerts on the DDC page, and I find these to be pretty helpful. Again, the email that I got, probably an hour or two before I was forwarded this telephone chain, if you will, it was consistent with what they said. It's like parts of the park are going to be closing, things of that nature. It all seemed fine, but however, learning this news, it seems like they could have used some different language to better inform us.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Folks, if anyone wants to look at the flyer that Adam is looking at, it was in the Wednesday email that the office sent out earlier this afternoon.
Okay.
Thank you, Jesus. Are there any other questions or comments for Adam? All right. Before moving on actually to moral business, Rick, I realized that I skipped over a report if you wanted to make a report on budget.
Yeah. No, I'll waive a report. I just want to make sure that, the office did a lion's share of work on the district needs statement and ended up having to submit it at the end when Brendan was off on jury duty. So more thanks to the board office for all the work they did on that project. That's it.
All right, thank you, Rick. And of course, again, thank you to the board staff. As we are concluding the meeting, I just want to bring up one topic as we move forward for new business. I just want to take a couple of minutes before we end to talk about how we use executive committee meetings. And I just wanted to do some crowd sourcing. I have some ideas on how to make it more efficient and to make it more beneficial to our purposes, particularly to our committee work, again, to our public engagement as well. But I wanted to get some thoughts, if anyone has any, on what you think executive committee should be used for, if you have ideas for what would be helpful to you as committee chairs as we go through this process once a month. Is this something you want to do once a month? Is this something that, you know, the type of stuff that we talk about usually can be done by email or something? So I wanted to just, you know, connect with all of you as the executive committee to see, you know, what role this plays in your work and what you would like to see going forward or what things you don't want to see going forward. I just want to take some minutes to see if anyone has any thoughts on that. Kevin, go ahead.
This might be a little bit off topic. Jeannie D'Onofrio, Vice Chair of Environment and Parks Committee, had mentioned it would be helpful, and I agree with her, to have some sort of brainstorming. I know this is away from the executive, but to have brainstorming with our committee, have some ideas on some proactivity. Is that something where all of those meetings have to be, and pardon my innocence, is that something that all the meetings have to be transparent? Or can we break into individual brainstorming type meetings with committee members? And I'm sorry, that doesn't answer your question, but it's been on my mind all week.
That's a good point. Part of my idea or experiment, if you will, for our next executive committee is I do want to encourage that type of thinking at the executive committee level as well. Things that you've discussed at committee level that might be of pertinence to other committees. As we already saw tonight, there was a lot of overlap and a lot of issues we just saw with like land use and transportation and you on the Astrolevy playground, and to encourage more of that partnership and collaboration. I'll leave it to Jesus about what the public meetings laws are, and I don't know exactly what you're talking about. We can kind of talk offline about what you're thinking about as, you know, as a chair, but you know, if you're ever having a meeting that's discussing board business, that does need to be transparent. Mm-hmm. And Jesus, correct me if I'm wrong, or any of the previous chairs who are joining us, if you have ideas on that as well.
And let me just clarify that, you know, we certainly don't mind and we should be transparent. It's just that these would be informal brainstorming type sessions that would not follow any particular guidelines or rules or regulations. That's all.
Yeah, so if you're describing what, you know, would seem to me like planning for a meeting, you know, that would be different. But just anything that would be public interfacing or discussing board business or, you know, resolutions or stuff like that should be transparent and public. And Jesus, do you have anything else on that? Or Molly or Rick? Or Mark as well?
Well, I'll let the former chair speak first, and then if they don't cover anything that then I'll step in. But
okay, I mean, I think you already said it, but it just needs to be public if it's public. If you want to meet someone for coffee or something, that's, you know, another thing. But if it's a meeting for the community board, it needs, you know, it's public. There, the open laws apply. So, but coffee, you know, a nice walk in the park is a different thing.
Involved. All right, thank you.
Rick, I see your hand up.
Yeah, well, I have to be just a little bit more formal about that. Because that's the way we do it, but technically anytime you're talking policy, it should be open. Anytime you're talking kind of internal politics, procedures, organization, those kind of things don't need to be necessarily open to the public, but open meetings law would definitely require anything having to do with forming policy, including before a resolution is actually presented to a committee. That gets a little fuzzy, but some would say that even those kind of discussions have to be subject to public scrutiny. But in general, we end up playing with that a little bit. We don't get into any trouble.
Okay, thank you.
Corinne, I see your hand up.
Yes, I mean, I just wanted to just kind of answer your question about, what can change or, with these executive committees. And, like we started the beginning, of this meeting, talking about, human rights is really the same as, healthcare. It's the same as housing. It's the same as public safety. It's the same as education. And, it just, it makes you want to throw out a loaded word, from the woke crowd, which is that, everything is intersectional, it's all woven together. And what is happening right now with the rent stabilization report that Adam kind of brought up, and then Pita picked up on it as well, and I'm following it along, but I was just so many other things were going on in housing that I'm just like eternally grateful that two other committees kind of picked that up. And I would just like to see more of that, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's one of that's a huge priority of mine as well, is to use that word intersectionality, about how do we connect all of these issues that do have overlap, and really making sure that we're intentional about those partnerships and discussions. So thank you. I appreciate it matters to you as well. Don, your hand I saw.
Yeah, just first of all, I was going to use the term thematic. That I think if we had more thematic discussions here, that cut across things. The other thing is that I look around the room, I see I'm no longer one of the newest people on the executive board, but when I was one of the newest people on the executive board, I always felt we spent just way too much time going through agendas, of meetings. And if there was some way where we could meet the needs of the office for clean agendas, and I'll confess mine aren't always clean. But if there was some way we could do that and then limit that part of the discussion, but to half of the meeting, to half an hour or so, and then have a more thematic discussion, of a topic that cuts across different groups for the rest of it, that I would really like to see.
Awesome. Yeah, that's something I had in mind, actually. Brian?
Yeah, so two things. One is that in regards to the open meeting law, of course, we really got to be careful. I do think that we, as a group, we're very concerned about how much information we pass among people. I know that with Transpo, we've had to kind of moderate the group that communicates among the Transpo members, simply because people start really talking, debating issues rather than just raising articles and bringing up things for meetings. I think that a good guidepost is if we wanted to do breakout sessions and they weren't fully recorded and they were not given minutes, it could be things like, why don't we brainstorm topics or issues in the district that we could bring up to discuss the meetings, but then those breakout groups couldn't actually do policy or start forming resolutions. I think that might be a little bit more straightforward for the other members of the board to understand, so that we can guide them more effectively to being able to utilize those kind of sessions. The other thing I wanted to throw in, and I as chair of ad hoc budget, this is something that exec and budget had in common a lot, is that these are committees that deal with other committees' issues, and the topics sometimes go directly into debating the issue at hand. And I personally, as a board member, don't mind being told hey, save it for the right committee. I know that that's sometimes hard to redirect other people to doing. Like on budget, we would discuss a budget request that was forwarded to us by a committee, and then they'd start having a full-on committee discussion about the issue as if that was our budget committee issue to discuss. And so we don't want to do that kind of thing. And I think for the purposes of us forming our agendas, that's something that we should try to avoid, is when we're discussing agenda items that we start suddenly discussing the item that's on the agenda rather than discussing whether like the agenda has everything it needs in it and whether we should just move on with the, you know, the scheduling and the date and get on to the next committee. So yeah, I think that's something to keep in mind. Like we should form the, use our exec time to form the agendas, not discuss the items on the agendas, and then use whatever time we have left to try to do some free thinking about the district or about issues that we think are coming up. So yeah, that's better.
Great points, Brian. I appreciate it. And Kavitha.
Yeah, just to, I mean, you reminded me of something that I meant to say when I was actually presenting the agenda, was all the things that come up with 197A are parts of something that a different committee does, right? So it's like, we're talking about housing, we're talking about the loss of some healthcare services, we're talking about opportunities for, who knows, education or open space or other things. So that, you know, that was something that I had in mind and I didn't mention, was if we do convene a panel or something, it's something that I would love to have a joint panel with other groups that, or other committees that think that that will be useful, or, you know, could get more of an audience if we kind of put our heads together about what we could focus on and maybe do a series. But I do think this is better used rather than just being kind of this dry going through agenda thing, to really do a brainstorming session, so we can figure out like the overlap between different things. And like 197A is a tool we can use for other things. So happy to collaborate on some of this stuff.
Awesome. Thank you all for that. Corinne, is your hand up again, or is that a follow-up? Yep.
Yeah, sorry, and then shut up. But
I never know if people just leave their hands up or they have an additional.
No, but it's getting long and my dinner's waiting too, so I want to go. But I think you know, like this already happens in an unofficial way, but maybe we can make it more structured, so that it's just more of an expectation that there's a particular liaison, like in how, you know, in housing and homeless, there should be somebody who it also is in health and education and can kind of almost like give like a little report, and vice versa. I mean, I know like Abby is in health and education, so I will like ask her already. So I'm doing it, but it would be great to maybe formalize it.
Great idea. And John, is your hand up again?
Yeah, just be real quick. I think Brian put it well, but the distinction between, you know, discussing an agenda and forming an agenda. I think if we focus more on just forming the agenda, saying this is what it is, rather than get into the long discussions. And then I certainly agree with what Corinne and Kavitha has said about, you know, thematic discussions across groups.
Okay. Thank you so much. If any committee member has any other old or new business, please raise your hand. All right, seeing no further business, the meeting is adjourned at 7:40 p.m. Thank you, everybody, and I hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving next week.
Thank you.
Thank you, you too.